Hello, friends. How's everybody doing? I have a cool announcement that is about 2 months too late. I would like to officially announce the release of my new novel, The Last Seraph, the third and final tale of the Nosferatu conspiracy saga, which came out actually on March 25th. But there's this really funny thing that Amazon likes to do where they send author copies out whenever the hell they want to. So, it's just weird to know that there's people out there reading your book that you don't have as the person that wrote it. But now I have it, and now I'm finally making an announcement. This is, of course, the hardcover copy. Nice, fancy, cool dragon on the cover, of course. If you've read the book, you know why. That's the funny thing about this entire series. Which, you know what, let's pause before I get into that, because I am going to give a talk on the series, like a little bit, because I don't like to go out in public, so I would never, ever do like a bookstore event to give a talk on my books, because no, that's just not for me. So I'm going to do a little talk on how the series came to be, what this book is more about, and why you should snag a copy of it. But first, I think you should check out the trailer. All right, I think that's a fun little trailer. I made it myself with my new skill set, I guess you could call it. So yeah, this is the third and final book, The Last Seraph. It takes place mostly in and around Paris, but there's also scenes in Berlin and the Carpathian Mountains as well. I'm trying to think. There's actually some scenes in Serbia too. If you're a werewolf fan, I think you'll very much like those scenes because I brought some of the lichens back. They sort of, I don't want to ruin it. I'm not going to say it. Maybe there's lichens, maybe there's not. I don't know. What do I know? I'm just the guy that read the book. So yeah, here it is. Check it out. The entire trilogy. This is in front of you. 20 years of my life's work. Now, not 20 years straight. There was huge gaps of time, upwards of a decade, where I didn't touch it. This is the first book, The Sleepwalker. They all have new covers. These two both have new covers that match the new sort of ritzy one here, I guess you could say. Ritzy? Is that how you quantify a horror title? Like, man, this is one ritzy-ass horror book. A little bit of razzle-dazzle in there, some razzmatazz. That's what I'm about. Anyway, so yeah, The Sleepwalker, The Sommelier, and The Last Seraph. So The Sleepwalker was the first book in the series, and I conceived of this novel in 2006, actually. There was a gentleman by the name of Stephen Elliott. This is when I used to work with publishers. There was a gentleman by the name of Stephen Elliott who is a very gifted, artist in general, really. Like, he's a filmmaker, but his writing is outstanding. And he was working on an anthology, and he invited me to be a part of it. At that point in time in my career, I had published nothing long form whatsoever. So I had only been published for like kitschy little satire books. And that's one of the things you learn as an artist, that when you start getting out in front of people, if you do something and they like it, they generally seem to just want more of the same. So he's like, hey, could you write one of your little kitschy satire-y things for the book? And I said, you're goddamn right I could. And so I wrote this thing called The Vampires of Draconian Hill, which was like a dark poem about these vampires who manipulate these little children to guard their city so they can go out and murder everybody, and then they bring all the treasure back to the kids, and then when I saw some of the imagery that came through from the artist that I worked with at the time, a gentleman named Vaughn Doe, who I haven't spoken to in a very long time. So if you're out there, Vaughn, hello. Hope you're doing well. That guy's a true talent. I hope he's up to some good stuff. When I saw the artwork, I was inspired by it. I'm like, oh, there's something bigger here. So I basically started writing this book. And what's funny about this book is because everyone wanted kitschy Dr. Seuss-esque things that I was doing, every single agent that I showed the book to was like, what is this? I'm like, oh, it's my new novel. They're like, yeah, but you don't write horror. I'm like, yeah, I do now. And they're like, yeah, but we don't rep horror. So I was like, oh. And then every other agent I tried to acquire after that quit speaking to me after I handed them the book. Like, I remember the last agent that I worked with, she said something at the meeting that we had that was like, I don't read past page 10 or so. It was like some kind of like, I don't have time for this. And so we had ended up communicating in between there, and I'm like, well, how's it going? And she said, well, I'll tell you that I'm on page 60. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And then I never heard from her again. So I wonder what it is at page 60. By the way, I'm not ragging on agents. I respect the agency. I respect what everybody does there. It's just, you have to understand, if you're an author, these agents bust their ass to get in front of these high-level editors. So, like, you're only as good as what you're given. Like, whatever you put in front of an editor is how you're perceived as an agent. And if you're giving them weird stuff that you don't know how to get behind, right? And then they reject you, so it's fine. And it actually ended up working out better for the end. So I basically ended up shelving it and quit writing because there was a lot going on in my life at that point in time, and I just thought I was done writing. But the story stuck with me, and I always thought, I'm like, I think this is good. I think there's something here. So I ended up hiring a friend of mine who is actually the gentleman who discovered my writing at Soft Skull Press, named Nick Mamatas. If you're not familiar with Nick Mamatas' work, you should be. He is probably one of the best kept secrets in narrative fiction, speculative fiction, all kinds of fiction, really. Nick's like the kind of guy that like makes other writers, like we've shaken our boots around him, because like he can write anything at the highest level. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, he's written thrillers, he's written like really good. There's one called Under My Roof, which is a hilarious satire. He's just one of those guys, but he's also a very, very good editor. And Nick is the kind of editor that you want to work with, because he'll just tell you straight, like, this sucks. Like, I mean, he's not that mean, but he'll tell you, if your book is garbage, he's the kind of guy who will tell you that it's garbage. So I'm like, well, he's going to be the good dude to hire. So I said it to him, I'm like, well, this is probably the end of that book, because Nick's just going to rip it to bits. And there were parts that Nick absolutely ripped to bits for sure. But overall, it was a pretty positive edit. So I applied those edits, and then I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't know what it was. I was just, that's where I was in my head at that point in time. So I shelved it almost for another 10 years. But I had the manuscript printed out. It sat on my desk. I kept it on a shelf for like a decade, and it just sat there. And I'd look at it and be like, I hate you. I don't like you, And then finally, I made peace with my little manuscript and had it again. And at that point in time, I had reached out to an old editor, a friend of mine, and he recommended a new editor for me who was dealing mostly in mainstream literary fiction. She edited for my publisher, Soft Skull Press, in the past, but also had done stuff, I think, for like Scribner, or there was I think she does like Big Five stuff. Anyway, amazing editor, like transformed this book from like pretty cool to like next, in my opinion, like a next level piece of vampire fiction. And it was interesting because when I first contacted her, she was sort of like, well, I don't really do horror, so I don't know if this is the right project. And then I was just at that point in time tired and desperate to just get it finished. So I'm like, it's fine, just edit it, please. And so she took it on, and again, it was the same thing. As she was editing, I was like, oh, this is not going to go the way I hope. It's going to be bad. And she came back with a pretty glowing first edit saying, like, this is a really fun piece of fiction. She's like, who are you doing it with? And I said, I'm basically just going to put it up as a PDF on my website, because I'm just going to try to honor the work and not spend all this time writing this 500-page thing and then just. So she's like, yeah, don't do that. You should do something with it. So I decided at that point in time, because I was involved in a couple entrepreneurial endeavors that I just wasn't vibing on whatsoever. I'm like, well, maybe this is a good time for me to use some of these entrepreneurial skills that I have and sell something I want, which is my own books. So I did that, and I released The Sleepwalker in 2020 to my surprise. And it was really interesting because I wasn't I didn't really know how to do book marketing at that point in time, but I was using some marketing that I knew from like online website marketing. And suddenly I would show up and I would see like 240 pre-orders out of nowhere. I'm like, what is happening here? And then it just, and that's the other thing too. I always say to people that if you're a writer and you want to get out there, do it yourself, dude. Like, do not waste your time. Don't put yourself into that system. Look, it's not that the agent, editor, publishing system can't work, right? It does sometimes work, but more often than not, it chews people up and spits them out. If you get your first book out with a publisher and it tanks at all for reasons that are not your fault, you're done. They will not work with you again, by and large, right? Whereas you, promoting your own work, it's your job. Like, these books still sell today. I mean, it's not a lot. I don't sell much of them anymore, like maybe a couple hundred of them a month. But over the year, that's pretty good. And the fact that I know I'm still building a new fan base to lead into my other novels, it's great, you know? So I'm very pro doing it yourself, especially now I've, tried to set it all up as a legitimate publishing organization with I've hired other authors, I put out other people's work, etc. So yeah, The Sleepwalker, it's basically the fall of the Romanov dynasty retold as a vampire thriller. Rasputin is the star. I'm a big Rasputin fan, of course. When people ask me who would you like to meet historically, I'm like, I don't know if I want to meet him, but I would just like to see Rasputin in the flesh. The guy just fascinates me. Shows up drunk and barefoot in St. Petersburg, Russia one day and almost takes over the entire country. That's a compelling fellow. And the mythology of his assassination, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, is basically what this book is about and how he was a vampire, essentially. Because in life, they shot him twice, they poisoned him, they tried to hang him and he wouldn't die. They cut a hole in the river, drowned him. When the autopsy 3 days later, his fingernails had showed signs that he had tried to claw through the ice. I'm like, that's not a normal dude. That's a vampire, so I made him a vampire. I'm sure it seems like that's low-hanging fruit, but mine's different and better, so read mine instead. I don't know. So that led me to the Sommelier, the most controversial book in the series, because this had received, I never had planned it to be a series, by the way, but this had done so well, and surprisingly so. I'm like, well, I should keep going, because now I have other ideas. So I wrote the Sommelier, which is the most controversial book in the series, and the reason why it's the most controversial book in the series is because some of the fans of The Sleepwalker didn't like this one. They didn't like it. And the reason, it was a handful of people that kind of gave me some guff because they wanted a second Death Star. They wanted more vampires. But me, being a huge J.R.R. Tolkien fan, decided it would be cooler to expand the mythopia within my book. And, like, what else is out there? Like, if there's vampires roaming around St. Petersburg, Russia, well, like, what's happening in Serbia? What's happening in Paris? So there's lichens, there's demons, there's, what else is in there? There's a lot of stuff. Zombies, of course. And a giant white widow spider, who is my favorite character in the series, also inspired by J.R.R. Tolkien, because his experiences in World War I is what inspired him to write The Lord of the Rings. And so I thought, like, well, this book, The Sommelier, is about World War I. It takes place in Arras, France during the Battle of Arras. And I'm like, well, I want to see what my universe looks like. So I decided to take a tour through that. And some people thought that the book meandered on too much and wasn't as action-oriented as the first book. I'll disagree with that. I think this book is actually more action-oriented. But I see what they mean, because it's sort of, this book is basically about the hunt for the last bottle of Dracula's blood. Hence the sommelier, who's the guy with the wine bottles that may or may not have it. I see where they're coming from. Like, I don't mind that critique so much, just because it's like, yeah, I get it. If you wanted a more like Indiana Jones style MacGuffin, get the bottle. Oh, where's Dracula's blood at? But that seemed kind of lazy to me. So I decided to expand it and take a walk through the universe. Some people just weren't down with it, but that's fine. But this is my favorite book in the series, due to that, because this is sort of in many ways, the mythopia that I've built out, which is a combination of, it's like a multi-religion thing that I've created that is, it's largely based in Kabbalah mysticism, but it's also heavily occult based with like the Ars Goetia, and also the Lesser Keys of Solomon and a lot of demonology. So if you're into the occult or esoteric learning at all, you might actually really dig this book, because just don't expect it to match the historical mythology, because the entire aura of these books is that history is a lie, the truth be exposed. It's all about the fact that, you know, there's been supernatural incursions throughout history, and there's this shadowy cabal that then covers it up. So the reason why I blended some of those religions and made up my own, and some of that mythology into my own world is because I'm like, well, history's a lie, so I could make up whatever I want. And then it finally leads me to the granddaddy of them all, The Last Seraph. This book is, in my personal opinion, an absolute best. It's almost my favorite of the series, but not quite, just because like I feel like I really grew up as an author with this one, because this was a challenging book to write, like super challenging. And I honestly didn't know if I was going to pull it off because there's so many plot threads, and I feel that it does. And what I'm very happy to announce with The Last Seraph is I closed those plot threads. That was like the main, there was like actually one scene that my editor, Ann, was like, this scene ain't working. I'm like, I gotta use that scene because it closes that thread. And she's like, okay. She's like, it really slows down the book. I'm like, but it closes the thread, Ann, don't you understand? And Ann's always right. That's the funny thing. I love my editor. She's the coolest to work with because she actually sort of somehow understands my bizarre sensibilities. Coming from someone who does literary fiction as her main source of editing, that's no small skill, frankly. So yeah, this mostly takes place in and around Paris, but it also takes place in Serbia. I think I was mentioning earlier, Berlin. There's a lot of scenes in Berlin, and then finally the culmination, the climactic battle within Paris, where you may or may not learn about a white dragon. So these books also have dragons. And I just think that's a lot more fun than just making it vampires. By the way, if you are a vampire fan, I don't believe, like, I don't hear the criticisms from the last book that were like, oh, it lost the plot, there's no Nosferatu, there's no other this. Well, if you read this third book, you'll learn why it's called the Nosferatu Conspiracy. That doesn't really have anything to do with the Nosferatu. For those of you who don't know, it's not the Nosferatu from the film. I created a new vampire mythology that gives birth to these vicious vampires called Nosferatu, and just read it. It's fun. But one of the things I stand by is the vampires in the book are still terrifying, and because I don't like the sexy vampires, unless we're talking the Lost Boys, then I'll take anything with Tom Capello in it playing a saxophone. That's an excellent film for me. But I like the mythology in the Lost Boys. But other than that, like sexy vampires, kind of I think is stupid, and I'm more into like actual terrifying monsters that feed on you. Because I think when you're talking narratively and also, I guess even allegorically speaking, I think it's just a far more interesting sort of way to approach it. But yeah, so this book, I'm very sorry that it took me so long to write it, and I think you'll pick it up in the book. This is a very chaotic novel. And the reason why it's so chaotic, it may have actually ended up working out as a benefit, but my life when I was writing this was also extremely chaotic. For those of you who follow me and know, I'm also an entrepreneur, and some of the businesses that I was working on, I was falling out of love with entirely. I was trying to how do I get out of doing these things? I don't like it anymore. So there was a lot of just trying to structure those businesses for sale and all of this other stuff that was going into that was really getting into my writing time, because the reason why I'm an entrepreneur is so I can feed my writing addiction. So normally when I have businesses going, I can just sit around and write all day, which is the thing. That's why this thing is 700 plus pages with dense mythopia, because I had the time then. And this, I mean, I was getting down to I was trying to do 20, 30-minute writing sessions a day, even hoping to get 100 to 200 words in, just to get it out and sort of start piecing it all together. So this was not an easy book to write. The fact that I'm holding it is a little bit surprising to me, because there was one point in time where I'm like, I don't know if I'm finishing this. So just to see 20 years of my life here, it is pretty cool. Look at that. I think I have it in order. Maybe not. Am I doing that right? Yes. So yeah, that's it. And one of the things that I want to say, pick it up, grab a copy. For those of you who are interested too, I'm adapting them in the graphic novels. This is volume 3 of The Sleepwalker. Well, I'm just doing it as the Nosferatu Conspiracy as I work through. So if you happen to like the books and are interested in a graphic adaptation, it's pretty fun stuff and very time consuming. So that's why they take so long to get out. But I really wanted to thank everybody who supported me early on, because if it weren't for my readers and my fans and people who follow me online and retweet and help me promote, I would not have had the energy or the probably even the ambition to want to do something. So these books, I'm not trying to get like all corny Motley Crue, like I do it for the fans kind of stuff. That's not my style. Like legitimately, I mean it, that these books are as much yours as they are mine. Because if it wasn't for your support and your interest and, you know, following me all along the way and rooting me on, I don't think that I would have had the oomph to finish these. So thank you very much. Just because I wrote them doesn't mean they belong to me. So I hope that when you read them, you will enjoy them as much as I did writing them. And there's much more coming. There's the Black Chamber Files, which is a whole new universe that I'm putting all of these in, and there's going to be a lot more stories in the Black Chamber Files. Everything from, there's going to be World War II stuff, there's going to be biblical stuff. I'm working on some stories currently about the American West and the American Revolution as well. Lots of other cool things are coming, and I hope another thing you'll do is start supporting some of my short films that I'm making, because I'm having a very good time making that. And they're like, if you read these books and then you watch the videos, you won't believe it's the same person, because these are like super intense and frightening, and then the videos that I'm making are just total ridiculous nonsense. You know, so I have a range of things that entertain me, and that's just sort of where I'm following it. So thank you very much for all the support. I hope you'll snag a copy, maybe tell a friend or whatever. And yeah, thank you very much. And stay tuned for more. Take care.